Bom dia a todas, a todos. É com satisfação que vamos fazer a abertura da EVA Minerva São Paulo, Conferência Internacional, Tecnologias Digitais e Cultura Histórica. Um evento sobre a promoção da PROEC, e para fazer a abertura, então, oficial, eu passo a palavra para o professor Estevão Tomitsu Kimpara, que aqui representa o magnífico reitor. Professor Estevão.
Autoridades presentes, colegas, senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia. Em nome do professor titular Pascoal Barretti, magnífico reitor da Unesp, dou por aberto a Conferência Internacional EVA Minerva São Paulo, Tecnologias Digitais e Culturas Históricas. Então, agradeço a possibilidade da minha participação e desejo a todos um bom evento e que seja muito sucesso e de bom aproveitamento. Muito obrigado. Passo a palavra para o professor Raul. Um bom dia.
Obrigado, professor Estevão, que aqui representa, então, a reitoria. E aqui falo eu em nome da Pró-Reitoria de Extensão Universitária e Cultura, que tem o prazer de apoiar a realização do EVA Minerva São Paulo, com o desejo que a Unesp se insira nessa rede e tenha uma participação ativa, enquanto uma representante brasileira nessa rede de arte e cultura digital. Então, agora eu passo a palavra para o professor Paulo Henrique Martinez.
Muito bom dia a todas e a todas. Antes de mais nada, eu gostaria de agradecer a presença, o interesse, a participação de todas, de todos. Agradecer imensamente o apoio da reitoria e da pró-reitoria da nossa universidade, aqui representados na pessoa do professor Estevão, do professor Raul e toda a equipe técnica da universidade. Gostaria de agradecer também imensamente ao Harry Verwayen pela disponibilidade em estar conosco nesta manhã e aos nossos colegas e parceiros, na organização desta conferência, particularmente ao nosso querido Dove Wiener, que desde Jerusalém nos orientou e nos deu todas as instruções, os contatos, os caminhos para a realização deste evento desde 2019, quando fizemos um primeiro encontro na PUC, em São Paulo. Quero agradecer também à professora Andrea Dorini Rossi, coordenadora do grupo de pesquisa Veredas Digitais, que incorporou a ideia da realização deste evento como uma atividade também voltada para os alunos de graduação dos programas de iniciação científica e de iniciação à docência no campus de Assis. Também não posso deixar de registrar aqui o meu agradecimento a todos os estudantes de graduação e de pós-graduação, bolsistas, que integram o grupo Veredas Digitais, na confecção da arte, na manutenção do site, na atualização das informações, na agilidade das comunicações. Também conosco aqui está a Ana Paula Benner, que vai nos auxiliar no serviço de tradução, quando for necessário, vertendo comentários e questões do inglês para o português e vice-versa. E, por fim, agradecer imensamente à equipe técnica da Pró-Reitoria de Extensão e Cultura da Unesp, que tornou viável este encontro nesta manhã, as atividades desses 2 dias, ao professor Paulo Moura, também da equipe da Pró-Reitoria de Extensão e Cultura, pelo apoio e incentivo desde o primeiro momento, quando no primeiro semestre nós cogitamos de organizar esta conferência e tivemos uma conversa inicial, então, com o Dove, que nos estimulou a seguir adiante com o projeto. Eu passo, então, a palavra ao Dove, que é o nosso patrono, nosso guardião, e o nosso orientador nestas relações de cooperação interinstitucional e de cooperação internacional com profissionais e instituições internacionais. Muito obrigado, Dove, muito obrigado a todos e a todas.
Eu quero agradecer essa oportunidade que a Unesp me provê de voltar ao Brasil e ter um encontro com uma equipe tão dinâmica, uma instituição tão dinâmica como a Unesp, que já possibilitou levantar tanto a conferência de 2019 como fazer a conferência atual. É um prazer e uma honra ter a oportunidade de cooperar com essa instituição. Eu quero agradecer também a essa oportunidade ao Verwayen, a Europeana, que é a maior biblioteca digital do mundo, que está cooperando também com a Biblioteca Digital dos Estados Unidos e que, eventualmente, a partir dessa iniciativa do Unesp, poderá criar uma associação às iniciativas de bibliotecas digitais e de humanidades digitais no Brasil. Um grande abraço a vocês e um bom sucesso a essa conferência. Muito agradecido.
Muito obrigado, Dove. Eu passo a palavra, então, à professora Andrea para seus comentários, sua apresentação.
Bom dia a todas as pessoas que estão presentes aqui dentro dessa sala virtual e também aquelas que nos acompanham. Eu quero cumprimentar, em nome do professor Estevão, toda a equipe da reitoria, né, e também o professor Raul, por acreditar, né, no projeto de Humanidades Digitais e na proposta, né, que temos desenvolvido, principalmente a partir da liderança do professor Paulo Martinez e do Dove, em relação ao EVA Minerva desde 2019. Em nome do grupo de pesquisa Veredas Digitais, eu quero agradecer a todas as pessoas que contribuíram para que nós pudéssemos estar aqui nesses 2 dias falando sobre cultura histórica, né, sobre tecnologias e cultura histórica. Então, agradeço a oportunidade, com certeza teremos 2 dias muito proveitosos e muito enriquecedores. Agradeço a todo o grupo, ao professor Paulo, principalmente por acreditar que nós podemos contribuir de alguma forma. Obrigada, Paulo, obrigada, professor Raul, obrigada, professor Estevão, e obrigada ao nosso padrinho, Dove Winner.
Muito bem. Então, eu agradeço, né, a presença de todos nessa singela cerimônia de abertura do nosso evento. O professor Estevão está aqui conosco, né, na abertura, e vamos agora dar início à primeira atividade, né, que é a conferência do nosso convidado. Se o professor Estevão quiser permanecer ou precisar sair, fique à vontade, sem problema. Tá bom?
Muito obrigado, professor Raul. Vou pedir licença, então, para me retirar. Um abraço a todos.
Um abraço. Tchau, tchau. Bom, então, o professor Harry está conosco no momento e vamos dar início, então, à primeira atividade, né, da nossa programação, que é a conferência da abertura.
Please feel welcome to start your presentation and to open now with your talk our conference.
Harry? Não sei se... Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Harry. Deixa eu...
Yes, I understood it. I got the cue. Thank you.
Ok. Deixa eu apresentá-lo, né? Então,
Yes.
O professor Harry Verwayen é o diretor-geral da Fundação Europeana e o operador da iniciativa Europeana. Em toda a Europa, museus, galerias e arquivos digitalizam a sua coleção, e a Europeana apoia essas organizações na sua transformação digital. Então, esse trabalho orientado, né, para a colaboração criativa, trabalho de equipe de apoio e a ideia de que a partilha e reutilização de conteúdos culturais é uma contribuição positiva para todos. Então, esse movimento da Europeana tem a liderança, né, de Verwayen. Harry trabalhou no think tank Kennisland de Amsterdã, onde foi responsável pela inovação do modelo empresarial no setor do patrimônio cultural. E Harry possui mestrado em História pela Universidade de Leiden e trabalhou durante 10 anos na indústria editorial acadêmica. Então, é com prazer que nós recebemos, né, para a abertura, para essa conferência, Harry, para tratar do tema Europeana, Building a Common Data Space for Cultural Heritage. Então, com a palavra Harry, com muitos agradecimentos, né, pela organização brasileira aqui do EVA Minerva. Com a palavra, Harry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guimarães, and everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, even if it's through a camera and not live in your beautiful country that I hope to be invited to at some point. But thank you, and bom dia, as I think you're saying. It's afternoon already where I am in the Netherlands, and it's still morning, I think, where most of you are. So I can hope you hear me loud and clear. Great. So what I wanted to do today is tell you a bit about the developments in Europe with regards to digital cultural heritage, the plans of the European Commission for the further development of Europeana, of which I am the Director General, as Mr. Guimarães already said. But I'd like to do that in a way that is a little bit interactive. So we will explore together what a common data space might be. We will talk about what is digital transformation to us and how would we like to see that? Because the way I see it, the European Commission has very big plans at the moment. The recovery of Europe, the new European Bauhaus, the digital transformation, lots of money will be made available. But the way that this will manifest itself in real life is still something that we have an influence on. And I'd like to explore with you what that could look like, if that's okay. So to warm us up a bit, I'd like you to go to the following website, menti.com, MENTI.com, on your phone or on your laptop, and use the code 63867956. Ana Paula, maybe this is something you need to translate.
Yes, could you repeat, please, the website?
Yes, sorry, I should have, I forgot one important thing. I need to share my screen. That's my bad.
Yeah.
Hold on. There we go. Right. So if you could go to menti.com and use the code on the top, that would be great.
Então, o professor pede que todo mundo acesse a menti.com e use o código que está ali em cima, 63867956, e porque a apresentação de hoje vai ser interativa.
Brilliant. Yes. I see one person found the site. That's great. And we can see that that person locates itself in the middle of Brazil. That's wonderful. So if you could please, I'll give you a couple of minutes to warm up to this. Ana Paula, are you able to get to the site?
Yes, of course. O professor vê ali que já agora duas pessoas fizeram login na parte central do Brasil, então a gente vai pegar alguns minutos para esperar as pessoas acessarem o site e poderem dizer de onde estão falando.
Good.
I will try to log in too.
Very good. Yeah. I see more and more people, all of you in Brazil so far, but not all in the same place, which is interesting. Take a couple of minutes to see if this works for you, because I'll need you later on.
Então, vamos esperando as pessoas logando. Parece que a maioria está no Brasil, mesmo que em diferentes partes.
You can see I've also done it. There's one person now in the north of France. That's me. Okay. I think I will continue, but the idea is I'm going to use two more of those slides today. So take your time, go to this website, and then two more questions will follow later on. And I'm counting on everyone to help me there. Okay?
O professor disse que terão mais 2 slides como esse, questões interativas, então que ele conta que todo mundo fique ligadinho para poder participar em breve.
Okay. All right, so this was a warm-up exercise. Let's talk a bit about digital transformation of the cultural heritage sector. And in order to get us started, I'd like to share 3 stories of digital transformation. And I'd like you to put yourself in the mindset to think, how well does this resonate with me? How much of a digital transformation do you think this example tells us? So here we go. The first story I'd like to share with you is the story of this man that you see here on the website, on the screen, whose name is Adam Kozari. So Adam Kozari worked at the Royal Academy in London, the Art Academy. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, on the 18th of March, 2019 to be exact, he did something quite spectacular. He did this. He put on Twitter the following little request. Who can draw us the best ham? And that little tweet got picked up and became viral very quickly. And many people started sharing their own drawn hams. So you saw a variety of hams. This one is a ham in Art Nouveau style. And more hams, some miniature watercolors were shared of a ham lying down. There was, of course, also caricatures of hams. This is an office worker slumped over their laptop after a long day behind Zoom. So the point of this story is that within weeks, Adam Kozari used Twitter to put the Royal Academy squarely on the front page of Twitter. He became trending. So the Royal Academy before this tweet had maybe a couple of thousand followers on Twitter. Within weeks, that went to 500,000. So when we asked Adam Kozari, why did you do this? He gave the following simple example. He said, well, people seem to want some light relief from the news, and I found it important for my organization to provide some of that light relief. So this is my first little example of digital transformation. So ask yourself, how much of a digital transformation do you think Adam Kozari made happen within the Royal Academy of Art? Let's go to our second little mini story of digital transformation here. So the man you see in this picture is Sir John Williams. And Sir John Williams is an important figure in the Welsh cultural community. He was a doctor. In fact, he was the doctor of the royal family in the late 19th century. But he gave his whole library at the end of his life in 1926 and to the Welsh community, and started with that the Welsh National Library. He gave 25,000 books and 2,500 manuscripts to Aberystwyth in Welsh. Now, this picture got digitized in the early 2000s. It's an oil painting of about 120 by 1 meter. It got digitized in a reasonably high resolution of 2000 by 3000 pixels. And importantly, it received the public domain mark. And as such, it came on the web, eventually found its way on Wikimedia Commons, the Wikipedia page, and of course reached a much wider audience. Now, this picture, the digital image, got picked up by a young graphical designer named Erika Inzitari. She was Italian. And in 2017, she participated in a Europeana competition called GIF It Up. And I think you may have heard of GIF It Up. It's a little competition to make GIFs that work well on the web. So Erika used a picture of Sir John, used a little nifty tool called Spine Mesh, and started playing around with the image. Now, this is the image that she provided to the competition. As you can see, it's Sir John quirkily coming to life on the web through this little GIF. Now, Erika didn't win the competition. She became second, but she gave new life to Sir John Williams, and of course also developed a career for herself. She is now a 2D spine artist. If you look her up on the internet, on LinkedIn. So this is my second story about digital transformation. This is about a library engaging with digital processes, making it available, and putting the public domain mark on that image. Okay, so let's go to our third story. The third story is about this lady. She's Polish. Her name is Elżbieta Jobia. And I met Elżbieta personally in 2018 as part of the Europeana 1914-1918 campaign, where we collected material from people related to the First World War. Now, the picture she brought to us is the picture of this man, her grandfather, Bronisław Sobiak. And as you can see on this picture, which was taken in November 1916, right after he came back from the Battle of Verdun, where he got injured. Now, the Battle of Verdun, as many of you may know, was one of the longest and most dreadful battles in modern history. It lasted from February 2016 to November 2016, and Bronisław participated in it. Luckily, he got only a minor injury, survived it, and in this picture, you see him in Berlin right after that time. And I find this a somewhat moving image. You see a very young man in a suit that is too big for him, sort of glazing in the camera, not quite sure what to do with his hands and his life. Now, as I said, Elżbieta shared that image with us and the stories that she brought with it. So here you see her during a collection day, as we called it, in Poznan in Poland, where she shared the image and also the stories which had been with her family for a very, very long time. And as you can see, it moved her. It was a very moving part of the story she carried with her. This was the only picture of her grandfather that they had, and yeah, it had a lot of value for her and her family, and she wanted to share the image with the rest of the world to remember how bad the results of a war could be. So we had, between 2011 and 2018, we had about 180 of those types of collection days all over Europe. 10,000 people, regular citizens like you and me, participated in it from 24 different languages, and we collected nearly 200,000 objects, ranging from a photograph to a manuscript, many diaries and postcards. So this was my third little story that I wanted to share with you. And now, as you already thought, we're going to bring you back to Mentimeter. So Ana Paula, please invite people to go to the site again and put in this number.
Pessoal, o professor convida que a todos entrem novamente no mente.com e coloquem aquele código que está ali em cima, no canto superior direito, para poder votar. E a pergunta é, qual que você acha a mais convincente o mais convincente e atrativo exemplo de transformação digital?
That's right. Mais convincente. The most compelling example of digital transformation. So please cast your votes. And there is, of course, no right or wrong answer here, as you could imagine. Nevertheless, it's always interesting to see what people like most. The story about Sir John, who got digitized and became part of the creative industry. Is it Elżbieta, which allowed participation from regular citizens in cultural heritage? Or perhaps it was the story of Adam, who very smartly used social media. Okay. I'm going to take from this, I don't see a whole lot of people participating, but it's already clear to see what pattern we see. I think most of you found the story of Elżbieta, who shared her personal story with us. Most compelling example of digital transformation, Sir John second and Adam third. Now, like I said, I think there are no right or wrong answers. I think it just helps us to think about, what is digital transformation to us? It might be interesting for you to know that Adam Kozary became quoted by the New York Times as museum's king of memes. He was so good in social media that he got eventually picked up by Elon Musk and started working at Tesla. Found that wasn't really his thing, and is now working at the user agency in London. I really like what he did. I think he gave us permission to be funny on the internet. We don't always have to be serious in our work, and I think he opened doors for many people. The story about Sir John, I think, tells us that it's critical to keep not only digitizing our photos and paintings and so forth, but also being very careful about what kind of licensing we attribute to that painting. If we want it to become reusable, shareable on the web, we need to think about how these licenses play a role. And to give you an example, with Europeana, we now have about 50 million objects in our database. Half of them are in the public domain. So I think that's already a step in the right direction. Now, I think the reason why people find the story of Elżbieta the most compelling is that it involves real people, right? It's not just museum directors or library professionals. It's people on the street who find themselves in an interesting way participating in the story of Europe, in our collective story of the identity that we share. Now, the problem with the way that we conducted those stories, it's very labor intensive, right? How do you bring all these people together in rooms that they can share their material? Is there a faster way to do that? So thank you very much. I see lots of you have now participated, and I think it gives a very clear picture. So let's go back to the presentation. Voila. 3 little stories to illustrate the story of digital transformation of the cultural heritage sector. Now, I know that you in the EVA Minerva community, you've been around for what, 15, 20 years, much like Europeana, the Europeana community. And I think we've all witnessed a number of trends, right? We started out digitizing parts of our collections, putting some metadata to it, and we now find ourselves in a new phase. And what I'd like to do now is tell you a bit about what Europe has in mind, Europe has in store for the coming years. And I'll do that by talking about the development of what the Commission calls a common digital space for cultural heritage. So what's going on? In early March, Europe started releasing 2 very important documents. The first one is called Europe's Digital Decade 2030, and the second one is the European Data Strategy. And both of them have to do with how does Europe see itself as an autonomous region in the digital sphere. So the first one, Europe's Digital Decade, is really based on the idea that in order to lift Europe into the digital environment and become somewhat autonomous, we need to do 4 things. We need to upskill parts of the population so that they understand how to work with digital. It means that we need to build infrastructures such as 5G and so forth to enable the digital transition. And then we need to invest in both the public and the private sphere. Underpinning all that are digital principles. You may have seen Europe being very active on that front with things like GDPR and privacy and so forth. And that's that part of the digital strategy. On the right-hand side, you see the European data strategy, and that is meant to really empower the digital single market with digital data. And that's underpinned by 2 acts, the Data Governance Act and the Data Act. Now, this is just a little bit of background. We can forget about it very quickly, but it's important for you to understand, and for all of us to understand, how much importance and weight and money Europe is putting in the digital transformation. So, this is to give you a picture of sort of the transition that we see happening in the cultural sector. So maybe the stage where we're leaving behind in Europe, at least good parts of it, is the very first phase of the digital transformation, where parts of our collections were being digitized, some metadata was released. There was very little knowledge and skills in our organizations on how to do this more fundamentally. Perhaps we are now finding ourselves in a phase B, the second phase of this digital transformation, where we understand that it's not so much only putting books and papers under a scanner and making them digitally available. It's also developing a mindset of digital that makes us digital literate enough to make smart choices, whether to use Twitter, Google, or maybe an alternative platform to make our material available. And maybe the ultimate phase, and this is, I think, what the Commission is gearing towards in 2030, is a phase where all of our institutions are being fully compatible with the digital environment. Some would call this a state of digitality, where we really work in a blended environment where everyone in our organizations, from the director to the curator, uses digital for what it's really at its best. a hybrid environment, if you want. So that's sort of the progression that I think we're on. To give you an idea of what the ultimate goal is beyond that progression for the European Union, and perhaps also for us, I'd like to introduce the concept of a mirror world. In European documents from the Commission, you may see this back as the digital twins that are being developed. I think maybe you've picked up some of this, from the stories about Facebook and the metaverse. In essence, I think we are on our way to become part, because that's what it is, of a new platform that be developed. After the web came social media, and now we're starting to develop and becoming part of a 3D and perhaps a 4D environment that is being developed, where everything around us, everything physical, will also have a digital markup. So what we see is that the convergence of an abundance of data combined with parallel computing power, which has increased tremendously, and artificial intelligence, we see the convergence of digital and physical worlds. So the question we need to pose ourselves is, how does cultural heritage, how does the past have a role to play in this new platform that we're being developed? So to really get us into the right mindset, I'd like to read a couple of paragraphs from an article from Kevin Kelly from Wired magazine, which was published in March 2018, which I think tells us the most compelling vision of what that world could look like. So, I quote, "The mirror world doesn't yet fully exist, but it is coming. Someday soon, likely in the next 10-15 years, every place and thing in the real world, every street, lamppost, building and room, will have its full-sized digital twin in the mirror world. For now, only tiny patches of the mirror world are visible through AR headsets, stitched together to form a shared persistent place that will parallel the real world. On this platform, all things and places will be machine readable, subject to the power of algorithms. Also, like its predecessors, the web and social media, this new platform will unleash the prosperity of thousands more companies in its ecosystem and a million new ideas and problems that weren't possible before machines could read the world. Augmented reality is the technology underpinning the mirror world. It's the awkward newborn that will grow into a giant. Mirror worlds immerse you without removing you from the space. You're still present, but on a different plane of reality. And here's where it becomes really interesting to us. I quote, "Time is a dimension in the mirror world that can be adjusted. Unlike the real world, but very much like the world of software apps, you'll be able to scroll back. History will be a verb. With a swipe of your hand, you'll be able to go back in time at any location and see what came before." I hope this was understandable for you. This was using some difficult English, but if you want to go read the article, Kevin Kelly, Wired magazine, March 2018. It's a fantastic article. So let's roll back. The Commission has big plans. These plans help us in the transition from a purely physical world to a world with a bit more digital, to a blended world where a new platform will become emergent. So I'm going to ask you to go back to our platform here. Again, menti.com, using the same code if you want. And tell me, this mirror world, is this something that you really like? Is it something that you think, forget about it, no thank you? The digital world is already bad enough as it is? Or are you saying, it's interesting, but we need to talk more about it?
O professor convida para que nós acessemos de novo o mente.com com o mesmo código de anteriormente. E o que ele quer saber agora é sobre esses mirror world, esse mundo de espelho. Como que vocês se sentiram, o que vocês pensam a respeito disso. Então, ou sim, vamos fazer isso imediatamente, ou é interessante, mas nós precisamos falar um pouco mais sobre isso. Ou obrigada, mas não obrigada. O ambiente digital já é ruim o suficiente como está.
Obrigada, Ana Paula.
You're welcome.
Yes. So I can imagine you need a little bit of time to think about this. It's a complex new thing to imagine. In my view, it will happen whether we like it or not. This is a very powerful movement being driven by commercial entities, mostly in the United States and increasingly in East and Southeast Asia. So I can see some of you on the right-hand side, two of you say, no, thank you. The world is too messy already. Gosh, the amount of trouble we have even dealing with the 2D world, why would we even want to go to a 3D world, right? Yeah, I understand that. And some of you are a little bit like me. It's so exciting. Walking down the street, maybe with augmented glasses. You remember Google Glasses from years ago, but then in a better format. And being able to walk down your street and seeing, who lived in that building and what time was it built. I think that would be fascinating. But as I would imagine, most of you think this is interesting, but it really requires a bit more thinking, and we want to influence that. So thank you very much. This again gives a very, very strong signal of what Europeana and the rest of us will need to be working on. So let me go back. Whether we like this world or not really depends a bit on, whether we consider ourselves to be an optimist or a pessimist. And here I'm showing you the second contribution Erika Inzitari made to the Give It Up competition. This is also something that Sir John makes. So let's look at this a bit more detail. So part of this whole digital transformation strategy of the European Commission finds itself back in the funding programs that are being developed. And in early November, the Commission released two important documents that relate to the Digital Europe program, where Europeana will be part of. The first one is the Work Program 2021-2023, which will give us an indication of the direction that the Commission would like Europeana to take. And the second one are recommendations on a common data space for cultural heritage. Now, this is one of Europe's most powerful instruments to rally the member states behind the European Commission in a shared effort to do something together. So what do we know about this? Well, we know that the Europeana initiative will be at the center of this data space. And for those of you who don't know Europeana so well, it consists of both a platform with tools and technologies and so forth, led by the Europeana Foundation, but its real power is in the network association, the professionals that are contributing and learning from it, a peer-to-peer network led by the Europeana Network Association. And the third component of this is the Europeana Aggregators Forum, which consists of national entities also contributing data, knowledge, and expertise to the Europeana initiative. But we also know that the Commission sees the European data space as something bigger than the Europeana initiative. So perhaps there's room for other entities to contribute technology, knowledge, networks, and so forth to really expand on our ability to become part of this mirror world that is unfolding in a useful and humane and human-centric way, because that, I think, is, for me, of the essence. So the things that we need to think about are, what are the things that Europeana cannot deliver so well as other entities? What kind of frameworks are needed to become more compatible with 3D and point clouds and so forth? And also, what is it that if we think back about the stories of Adam, Elżbieta, and Sir John, how do we make these stories, which have people at the center, also the center of this common European data space? So there are many questions that we still need to unfold, and we will. But the essence for me that I'd like to zoom in on a bit is the word common, because that's something that the Commission put really at the center of it. It's a common data space. And common to me means that it's at least participatory. And participatory means that, if you go to the left, the material that we harvest is of high enough quality for people to really engage in, and is also open enough for being able to share. Remember the story of Sir John. What we're focusing on right now is also to make sure that it's multilingual. We work with 25 official European languages, but of course, we also have material from Brazil and from other countries around the world. And what we'd like is to be able to translate that material. In order to translate it, we also need to make it transcribed, because some of these things are not machine readable. So I think between open and multilingual is where we can find our niche, where Europeana will be able to make progress against that common data space. Give you a quick example. The story about Elżbieta, who shared her material with us. We had 200,000 manuscripts. Many of those were written in hand, in the trenches, in many different languages. And we designed a new tool and a new format called Transcribathon. And Transcribathon allows you to, in a very gamified way, and also using working with school classes of children between the age of 14 and 17, to really dig into the material, sometimes love letters from the front to the home, and transcribing that in a playful way. And by doing so, we also made sure that geotagging would be allowed to put in place, timestamps and so forth. And by doing so, we're slowly and gradually using technology and putting humans in the loop, as they call it, to make all this material much more accessible for future generations. And when we do so, we will be able to work in a 3D, much more immersive environment, like we're seeing here, using the material from the First World War in a 4D setting. This is Miss Sarah Kenderdine, who currently works at EPFL in Lausanne. She's one of the great artists of using immersive environments to experiment with cultural heritage. So if you ever have the opportunity to go to Lausanne, see one of those installations, I highly recommend that. So to make a long story short, I think creating and developing this common data space for cultural heritage based on the standards that we set with Europeana will require a lot of collective thinking. And that's why I invite every one of you to join us. The Europeana community is a strong one. I'm hoping perhaps Susan Hazan is also listening into this conversation. She is the head of the Europeana Network Association. It's free, and you'll be able to join up in 7 different communities, tackling big questions that we're all facing around technology, about how to reach educators, how to use this material for research, what impact means for us, and so forth. So this is an invitation to all of you. Join us, sign up, and then we can jointly also work on big common questions around this common data space. And there's one that I'd like to bring specifically to your attention. So over the past 2 years, many people of our network have been pushing Europeana to also take its responsibility with regards to climate change. something that we're all being confronted with at the moment, it's undeniable that we'll be facing some very big problems and issues. And as an organization that wants to play a role in digital cultural heritage, we also have a responsibility to take. And the numbers here are not lying. Here are a few. Every second, each one of us produces about 1.7 megabytes of information just by having your phone on. We currently see that we have about 44 zettabyte of data collected around the world. And a zettabyte, just to give you an idea, is a 1 with 15 zeros. It's gigantic. And all of that material, of course, all of that data needs to be hosted somewhere on hard disks, which require energy. And the biggest problem is that we know that currently the ICT component of energy consumption is about 3% of all the energy consumption. But we fear that by 2030, that will be as big as 20%. So that makes the internet one of the world's most polluting countries in the world. And that's something that we really need to take to heart. So that's why the Europeana community launched a climate manifesto. You can find it on our website. I'm going to put it here on the chat, Anna. I'm not sure if people on YouTube will be able to see that. Otherwise, just go to the Europeana website and find the climate manifesto, and please share it as widely as you can. And more importantly, sign up for the community, because we will only be able to come with good solutions if we do this as a collective entity. That's my strong conviction, at least. So that leaves me at the end of my talk. Obrigado for listening. And I hope that has given you an idea of where we find ourselves with the Europeana initiative at the moment, and what the challenges are in the future. So, Raul, can I bring this back to you for some questions?
Okay. Thank you, Professor Harry, very much for your very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Right now, the organization team is checking the questions that are on our forum on YouTube. So, yeah, we're gonna need a while to bring them to you.
That's fine.
Harry, foi muito interessante as suas provocações. Não sei se a Ana Paula pode ir traduzindo para ele.
Uhum. O ideal é que o senhor fale uma ou duas frases e aí eu posso...
Okay.
Professor Harry, Professor Guimarães has really thanked you for your presentation and said it was really interesting.
Nós temos assim várias perguntas, né, que estão sendo colocadas no chat do YouTube. E antes de colocar para vocês essas perguntas, né, eu gostaria de fazer alguns comentários sobre o desafio que a digitalização das humanidades nos coloca, né, para diferentes gerações, os mais jovens e os mais velhos.
So, Professor Guimarães has said that there are many comments again on the YouTube chat, so they're processing it. But before that, he would like to make a few comments on how these challenges of digitalization, mostly for humanities, are being faced, especially considering the differences between generations.
Yes.
Só um minuto. Você disse que o mundo real cada vez se aproxima mais do mundo digital, né? Agora, eu penso que os mais velhos que tiveram uma experiência, por exemplo, dentro de um museu, né? Você está diante de uma obra de arte, de um museu, e depois você tem a experiência digital. A nossa memória do mundo real nos permite uma certa relação com o mundo digital. E a nova geração já conhece todo esse acervo pela via digital, né? O que ele vê de transformações que estão a ocorrer num curto espaço de tempo. Era essa pergunta.
So Professor Guimarães has asked that you have said, Professor Harry, that the real world is closer to, even closer and closer to the digital world. However, he has wondered whether, when you think of the older generation who has had direct experiences with being in a museum, being in front, experiencing in present these art pieces, can relate this experience with now through the digital world. However, and accessing memories, for example. However, the new generation has mostly directly experienced through this digital experience. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, a couple of thoughts on this. The first one is on the experienced separation of a digital and the physical world as we currently experience it, right? So you'd probably see people from older people walking through a museum and interacting with the physical environment around them, and young people walking through a museum like this, right? Not even looking at the real art around them. And I think the upside of this new blended world is that there will not be, what's happening here in this box will be integrated in the physical environment, right? If you get the right technology on your head, for example, you'll be able to look at a sculpture from Rodin and also being able to find out other material, metadata from that thing, creative new environments and so forth. You'll be able to interact with it. So I think this is a world that potentially will serve both the older and the younger generation equally well. But of course, I mean, that's only the promise. If we're not careful, some big parts of the population will be excluded from the experience, right? Elderly people, young people, people with, from different cultural backgrounds, who are currently not relating to what we do. I think that's a big thing that we've learned in the past 2 years through the efforts of the Network Association of Europeana, is how important it is to be more inclusive to people from other backgrounds and so forth. So we've put a lot of effort with Europeana on becoming more diverse and inclusive to other people than the regular people that you see in the museum. Does that answer the question, Professor Guimarães?
Respondeu a pergunta, professor?
Muito bom, muito bom. Não sei se, Ana Paula, você vai traduzir o que ele disse, e aí nós temos no chat do YouTube várias perguntas em inglês ali. Você está enxergando o chat do YouTube?
Eu estou aqui eu estou paralelo aqui olhando.
Eu poderia as 3 primeiras em inglês, mas se você quiser ler para ele.
A primeira ali do Nelson Bolgioli, certo?
Ok.
Posso começar por essa?
Pode.
Okay. Professor Harry, I'm going to bring some questions from our YouTube chat. So I'm going to be reading and simultaneously in state of digitalization. However, as it was discussed about the hybrid world, data and the digital media, and the question comes to this. Aren't these ideas a bit controversial in the sense that what it does truly mean Europe in a digital context? Mostly when you consider that there are analogical guidelines of digitalization based on geography and geopolitics are essentially pre-digital.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last bit?
Of course. Yeah. he has said something like this. He has asked whether thinking about this digitalization of Europe from an institutional perspective is not a bit controversial within this digital context, considering that the basis of geography and geopolitics are basically still pre-digital.
Yeah, okay, so the controversial part maybe is why this focus on Europe and this whole maybe perhaps false sense of autonomy that comes with it. So I would agree. I mean, I think the Europeana has always seen itself as part of a much bigger global effort to connect all the heritage of the world in a digital form. That's why interoperability and open standards have always been incredibly important. And that's why I'm here talking to you, because I find it important that we share the same standards so that I can benefit from all the digital efforts you're doing in Brazil and vice versa. So I'm not particularly Eurocentric in that way. But you must not forget that the European Commission, of course, has a role to play to also safeguard the interests of its 27 member states. And I think what you see is that Europe is trying to find its way in the world again, in the digital world, not becoming too dependent on the United States or China and Southeast Asia on the other side. So we're trying to find our own position there. My hope is that always will be based on open standards, privacy, and so forth. That becomes the export product, not the data itself, but the standards. But I can see that this could come across as a bit controversial, indeed.
Muito bom. Ana Paula, a pergunta do Eduardo José Afonso, você pode ler para ele?
Okay, Eduardo, certo. So the next question, Professor Harry, is from Eduardo José Afonso, and his question is, how do you, and by you here he means probably Europeana, intend to protect these materials' copyrights, meaning photographs, documents, for instance?
Well, Eduardo, first of all, it's important to understand that Europeana doesn't hold the data itself, right? Or the model that Europeana uses is based on we collect metadata and links towards the original. So in that sense, I could say, but it would be an easy answer, that Europeana is not responsible for the protection of the copyright. However, we have, and I think that's probably one of the bigger achievements of the past 10 years, created a licensing framework that you can find on the Europeana Pro website with 14 license statements that we advise our cultural heritage partners to use. So we work with close to 4,000 libraries, museums, and archives, and everything that they bring to us needs to have one of those 14 licensing statements, ranging from public domain on the one hand to in copyright on the other hand. Now, it's my job with Europeana to make sure that this is very clearly indicated on the Europeana website. What copyright status the copyright holding institution attaches to the object. It is not my role to police whether this copyright has been infringed somewhere down the line by someone else. Now, of course, there are all kinds of movements, NFTs, all this blockchain technology, which would allow you to be much more protective of copyright security, but that's not a direction that we currently are taking. I hope that answers Eduardo's question a bit.
And Professor Eduardo, actually, he has identified himself afterwards. He wanted to add that he's from the Department of History from Unesp.
Very good.
Eu só identifiquei, professor Raul, que era professor Eduardo, que eu não tinha visto o comentário mais abaixo.
Tranquilo. Eu queria destacar a pergunta do Tiago Cavalcante, ele gostaria que o Harry falasse um pouco da evolução da tecnologia para otimizar o armazenamento de dados, né? Nós ficamos em choque com a quantidade de energia e o impacto que isso pode causar no futuro. Então, a perspectiva de uma evolução tecnológica para diminuir esse dano. Se pudesse falar um pouco sobre isso.
Qual é o nome da pessoa que perguntou?
Tiago Cavalcante.
Tiago, né? Tiago Cavalcante. So, Professor Harry, now Tiago Cavalcante has asked regarding, they were shocked actually first by how much energy is consumed regarding data storage. So the question would be whether there is a prospect regarding the evolution of technology to allow an optimization of this data storage in a way that also reduces energy consumption.
Yeah, great question. I was shocked as well when I saw those numbers. I think up to 2 years ago, I sort of lived in the blissful state where I thought, digital is ephemeral. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't really exist, but it doesn't. So a couple of things about this. So yes, on the one hand, ICT, and I think that's more than just storage, right? It's the storage, but also the bandwidth that it takes to access it, for example, is huge. I think there are some promising things happening at the moment. If you look at Google has released, I think even last week, its plans to become completely carbon neutral by 2030 or something. So, the use of clean energy is, I think, the first starting point. Green energy. Digital cleanups is what we're doing now at the Europeana Foundation. So minimizing your digital waste, if you want, is another way of making sure. There are other ways. I mean, if you use video, don't use the highest resolution. Instead of sending the videos around, provide a link where people can find it. So there's a number of behaviors that we can adopt. Plus the clean energy, only work with providers who can certify that they use clean energy, for example, is a big thing. So there are many developments which I think will support us in the right direction, but starting to become conscious of it is really the starting point for it. So at the Europeana Foundation, we're currently doing a carbon footprint. And it's interesting. I mean, we used to travel a lot, but of course, we're also now becoming much more conscious of what you can do in a hybrid environment, like we're doing now, right? It doesn't mean that I'm not coming to Brazil, by the way, at some point. But it's, I mean, that's why I really ask, become part of the network, because that's where you both learn and can contribute on this front.
Muito interessante. Ana, você podia falar então da Patrícia? Acho que nós temos mais a Patrícia e comentário final do professor Eduardo de Assis, para a gente finalizar. Mas o da Patrícia, por favor. Patrícia Real.
Okay. Yeah, so the next question, Professor Harry, is from Patrícia Villarreal. She has asked, digital technologies are interfering in all the daily lives of human beings. What are the positive and negative points of this interference?
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, I think that is a very big question. It requires a whole conference in itself, I think. I think we're learning more and more about the negative effects, about how much the current platforms that we interact with, and we know there are 5 that dominate our digital environments, right, are using some very simple behavioral science elements to make us addicted. It's based on maximizing the amount of dopamine that you can run through your brain. So and I'm not trying to put the blame in the platforms right now. I think they have a really important role to play, but it's also about developing disciplines, disciplining ourselves more. In when do you put your phone away when you have dinner, for example, which is a constant struggle in my own home, to be honest. So I'm afraid I can't give you a conclusive answer on that. I think there are some very positive elements to it, but there's certainly, we're becoming more and more aware of the downsides, and that's something that all for the coming 10 years we'll need to be extremely conscious about. There's some really interesting work in this by a project called Indices, running in Europe, and they're really looking at the effects of open data. And Professor Pierluigi Sacco has done some incredibly interesting work that you should look at, Patricia.
Thank you, Professor Harry. Professor Raul, tem o comentário da Cíntia. Posso passar? Porque eu acho que dá para o professor falar um pouco
fazer um
do
comentário. Aí eu vou pedir para o Paulo Martinez e Andrea, se quiserem fazer também mais algum comentário, que a gente vai para o encerramento. Diga lá, comente o da... Okay. Explica para ele que nós vamos fazer, ela vai fazer, o professor Paulo e Andrea, e a gente devolve para ele, tá bom?
Okay, so Professor, I will bring one comment from the YouTube chat, then Professor Paulo and Professor Andrea will make some brief comments too, and then back to you so we can close it up. So the comment from Cynthia Verza is that we are going to need to recycle somehow the digital world, just like we are doing right now with the real world.
Professor Paulo Martinez, gostaria de fazer um comentário. Depois a Andrea e a gente devolve o Harry.
Não, só antes então do Harry responder.
Paulo, vamos fazer mais ou menos 2 ou 3 frases por vez, ok? Porque daí eu consigo
você vai
fazer a tradução.
Tá bom.
Sim.
Desculpa, Ana.
Não, sem problema.
Eu gostaria só de aproveitar a oportunidade para renovar os agradecimentos ao Harry, né? E desde já dizer a ele, Ana Paula, que nós aqui na Unesp gostaríamos muito de ter uma conversa presencialmente com ele num futuro breve, para que ele possa conhecer um pouco o calor, não é? E as nossas instalações, a nossa universidade. E agradecer a todos e a todas que nos acompanharam, particularmente a equipe da Pró-Reitoria de Extensão, sempre muito eficientes e prestativos, a generosidade sem fim do Dove Winner, que nos acompanhou, que sempre nos estimula, um apoio permanente, não é? Professor Andrea, a mesma coisa, professor Paulo Moura, bom, e professor Raul, sem ele nós não estaríamos aqui, né? Devemos tudo isso ao entusiasmo, à confiança e à energia dele, porque muitas vezes a gente vai ficando desanimado e ele está sempre ali para dizer, e então, né? Desculpa, Ana, acabei falando, mas você
vê que você consegue.
Você traduz o que der.
Yeah. This is from the German now. Eu estou dizendo falando na minha cabeça. So, Professor Paulo has taken an opportunity, first of all, Harry, to thank you very dearly for being with us today on this nice event, and also to extend you the invitation to come to Unesp, hopefully soon, in presence, so we can enjoy the Brazilian summer and get to know it. Yeah, and he has also made some dearly thankful for the audience and also some institutional thank yous.
Andrea?
Muito obrigada, Harry. Muito bom ouvir, né, a sua explanação e a sua forma de apresentação sobre a Europeana. Com certeza aprendemos muito com você nessa manhã. Sou professora do Departamento de História da Unesp de Assis e reafirmo o convite para nos visitar presencialmente. E, pontualmente, Ana, eu gostaria de saber a respeito da animação do Sir John, se o Harry puder falar. A animação da figura do Sir John, e se há um programa ou alguma linha que a gente possa conhecer mais, que nos interessou bastante. Sou professora de História Antiga e trabalhamos com arqueologia e imagens estatuárias. Muito obrigada.
Okay, so Professor Andrea, I'm laughing because I'm saying Andrea with the English accent. So first of all, she has, thank you very much for your presentation, and she has especially highlighted the way you have presented it. That was very involving. And as for a question, she's affiliated to the ancient history department, and she also has studies on archaeology and so on. And she was really interested in the Sir John's gift, and she would like to hear a bit more about it, if you have any ideas or any cues to be followed.
Yeah, I'm not sure what other ideas there are. To me, it was an example, a great example of how something as simple as digitizing a painting can get a new life somewhere on the web, and that there's a whole new ecosystem of jobs involved, right? You know, who would have thought 10 years ago that something like a 2D spine animator would be a real job? And it's a job now. There are specialists in there and I think it's growing. I read somewhere that in the next 20 years, 47% of the jobs that we currently know will not exist anymore. It's a study by Oxford University, I think. So that doesn't mean that half of us will be without a job. It just means that there will be completely new jobs like this one. And I think that's what I find inspiring about the story. It's actually, perhaps the story is less about Sir John, and it's more about Enrica and Zitari, the artist. Yeah. I can tell you one more little thing about Sir John, though, which I sometimes tell, is that there is a connection between him, it's never been proven, and the Jack the Ripper murders in London, because that's what you want to. Yeah, but it's never been proven, so I haven't said anything. Yeah.
So, I'd like to say many thanks for you, Harry, and I hope you can come to Brazil as soon as possible. And,
yeah.
And now I think finish our session, and if you would like to say something to finish.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a great pleasure to be here. I'm ever so grateful for being invited to organizations like yours. EVA Minerva are old friends of ours, so I really wish you all the best. And yeah, I think we've got it's a joint challenge that we have in the world, isn't it? It's not something that we in Europe or Europeana is only involved in. So let's keep the connection lines open. Is my big wish. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. And now nós convidamos a todas, a todos a acompanhar a nossa programação agora à tarde, né, às 14 horas. Continuaremos com a EVA Conferência Internacional, né, com uma sessão sobre a cultura e os museus, né, no mundo da pós-pandemia. Então, estão todas e todos convidados a prosseguirem conosco a partir das 14 horas. Obrigado. Bye, bye.
Thank you.